Hi, guys. My name is Leah with Southern Biophilliac Urban Farm. Here today to talk to you about quail and the garden. How to utilize more waste to grow more food. We've been gardening way before we even started raising quail. And once we got them, we wanted to know how to quickly use all their waste because they make a lot of it. So, of course, the first thing we're going to talk about is composting their poop because they sure do like to make a lot of that. So, there's actually four methods that you can generally use and it depends a lot on your setup. So, one of the methods that tends to work really well in like an aviary setting is a deep litter method. This is where you'll use brown materials. It'd be anything like wood chips. You can do pine shavings, pine pellets. There's multiple things that you can do for the deep litter. And basically, it is what it sounds like. You're going to layer that litter on deep. And what they will do is as they excrete onto it, they're going to kick it around. And when they do their dust bathing and burying themselves, they're going to be turning all of that over. So they're going to be composting it for you. Now, with this method, you generally want a 30-to-1 ratio, one being the amount of manure that's in that brown material. And depending on your climate, will be dependent on how often you actually scoop that out to use in your garden. So generally, warmer, hot climates like the one we're from, we can utilize it as soon as 2 to 3 months. Some of your cooler climates, you're going to be looking at 4 to 6 months before you completely empty that out and relay that deep litter. Now, you can top that litter as you go. So if it's getting icky, you can go ahead and put more on top of it. And that's just going to they're going to keep turning it and composting it down. The other thing is straight manure, which is generally what we deal with most often, because we do raise a majority of our quail in stacked pens. So with this, it is what like it says, it's just the straight manure. You're going to either add that right to a compost bin or to a pile outside where you're going to let it sit. And then there's two ways to deal with that. So you can do what's called hot composting. That's the way we do it here. Is you're just going to let it sit. It's going to heat up. It's going to break down really fast. And generally you can use that in as little as 2 to 3 months. Cooler climates, it takes much longer. The other thing you can do is you can actually turn that compost and that can take up to 6 to 12 months. So that's why we like to use the hot composting method. Another thing to do is you can actually use the manure to grow soldier flies. We've done this before. We hope to do it again. But you can put that manure into a bin and that will help attract these little insects. They're called soldier flies. And of course, it's climate dependent, but they look like black wasps, but they don't have a stinger. And what they'll do is they'll lay their eggs near that manure. And once those eggs hatch, the little larvae will come out, they'll go into the manure and they'll start eating it. They have a super big appetite and they can break that manure down in only 21 days. It's really fast. And they'll utilize 60% of it. So they're very good at composting it. Now, when you use soldier flies, you're going to use that leftover waste product from the flies after they've eaten through it, similar to worm castings in your garden, but it's ready in 21 days. The other cool thing is if you wanted to with the soldier flies is you can actually create a collection bin and those can be utilized as treats for your birds. The fourth one, which we don't really do, but I did want to mention it, is compost tea. And with this method, what you do is you would either use a bucket or a barrel. You'll take that manure, you'll add water to it, and you'll let it sit. Now, people do different timelines. Some people will do it a few days, some people do a few months. But what you'll want to do, let it sit, and then you're going to add it to water to dilute it. That dilution is going to help make it so it's not so hot. And you could pour it right around the plants. Biggest thing to note with the compost tea method is you do not want to plant it directly onto anything that you're going to be eating, just because of the fact of pathogens, microbes that you would worry about that could be in the manure. Another thing people don't think about as often is feathers. So feathers can be composted. They're very rich in nitrogen. They're considered a green. So it's similar to manure. Manure is considered a green when it comes to compost. So you'll want to mix it in with browns. That's your woody materials, your shredded paper, things like that. Now, feathers generally take about 60 days to break down. You can also throw feathers into soldier fly bins if you're doing that method. Now, the biggest thing with feathers is never ever use feathers from an unknown source. These need to be from your birds or you know where they came from. You don't want to be bringing in any pathogens and adding that to your garden. Eggshells are another common one that people talk about. So, eggshells are super awesome. They, of course, are made of calcium. That calcium carbonate helps to build not only those eggshells, but plant wall cells. So it helps to make those plant walls cells very strong. They have lots of great minerals in them. They contain potassium, phosphorus, magnesium, which are important for health of the plants. They can help lower soil acidity. So if you have plants that like acidic soil, blueberries are one of them. They love that acid. It would be beneficial to add these, and you could throw these right into a hole you're digging to put a plant. They also discourage disease. They're really good for plants that are prone to blossom end rot. Those are usually your nightshades, your tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers. So it's good to add those for them. It's going to help prevent that disease. That's a common disease, especially when it gets hot out. It's also known to help control pests. If you crush those up and put them around your plants that, say, snails and slugs love, they don't like that texture of the sharp shells, so they will generally stay away from that. And eggshells also encourage root growth, which is really great. Now, ways you can utilize eggshells, you can either dry them or some people will bake them in the oven. And you can use your shells that, say, you made pickled eggs or you cracked them open for breakfast. Just save those shells up, dry them out, crush them up, and you can add them straight to the garden. You can also, with these, make something similar to compost tea, but you don't have to be as careful with the eggshells as you would with compost tea because they're not high in nitrogen. And you can water your plants with that. And it's beneficial if you do that watering method and steep it like tea that you add in coffee grounds to it as well. Eggshells are recommended for any plants that bear fruit. This is one not as many people think about is your quail parts. So that's your blood, bones, meat, innards, anything that you wouldn't eat or utilize for a meal. So if you've ever gone to the store and bought blood meal, it's exactly what it is. It's the blood. So you can take that blood. It has a lot of great minerals and additives in it. And what you can do with that blood is you'll actually boil it down to help remove the water from it. You'll dehydrate it, you can grind it, you can add it to the soil. It's best if you dilute that blood meal down 1 tablespoon to a gallon of water before you add it to your plants because it's high in nitrogen. Bones. Bones can be broken down and composted. There's 2 things you can do with this. If you're doing soldier flies, you can toss those bones in there. They will break them down. It does take a little bit of time for them to do that. But if you decide that you want to do bones in, say, your compost pile, then what you will want to do with that is actually cook those bones first. That's going to remove anything that could potentially be hazardous before you allow that to break down into your compost. Meat and innards. So, for the parts of the birds that we don't eat, or if you don't have an animal that eats them that you would be thinking about tossing away, those things can actually be broken down. Again, a great way to do this is utilizing soldier flies. They will eat any type of waste products that earthworms would not. So they can completely digest a, com- a whole quail carcass in just a few days. It's actually pretty amazing, and then we'll turn that into compost that you can use directly into the garden. It's pretty cool. So any parts that you wouldn't be using for yourself, for your animals, you can feed to them. It's generally not recommended that you put meat or innards in straight into a compost pile, just because you could attract predators, things like that. They tend to get pretty stinky. but the soldier fly larvae method is usually the best way to go for that. And I hope you guys enjoyed this and that you get growing lots of great food this year.